cities and towns that have so much more resources than the city of Boston.
Boston City Councilwoman Julia Mejia thinks more migrants can be placed outside of Boston.
I think everybody needs to start opening up their doors because this is a shared responsibility.
Controversy over the placement of surging immigrants comes as a new report links immigrants who settle in Massachusetts to economic benefits for the region.
Well, Boston Councilwoman there, Julia Mejia, says that we have a shared responsibility here. Open up your doors. You got resources. Give them up. We need to house these people, says the Boston Councilwoman. St. Louis, Missouri, what kind of resources do we have to spare here that we should provide to people who just decided to put their middle fingers up and come across our southern border and do so under Joe Biden's administration, who has said, yeah, we'll lift that razor wire for you. Come right on in. To speak about this issue here in the state of Missouri specifically, the Attorney General of the state of Missouri, Andrew Bailey, joins us once again. Thank you, Attorney General, for being here today. It's good to have you back.
Hey, Annie, thank you so much for having me on and covering this important issue.
You are once again participating in as well as leading the charge to push back against the Biden administration. A lot of the conversation in the news right now is about this border bill that's in the Senate. But meanwhile, you're doing what you can with the power of your office as Attorney General in the state of Missouri to challenge the Biden administration on their abdication of duty. How is that process going for you right now?
Well, we're fighting and winning for Missourians every day. Look, President Biden on day one in office hung an open sign at our southern border. How did he do that? Well, number one, he signed an executive order saying he wasn't going to build any more border walls, despite the fact that in 2006 he voted as a senator for the Secure Fence Act. So he knows walls work, but it's a political position. He was willing to put the rest of our lives and security at risk by saying, no, I'm not going to do it. And then he perverted the law. He essentially used rulemaking authority to create new visa programs to allow large swaths of people into this country illegally who otherwise would not have been allowed in. And Congress never authorized it. But then he also instituted this catch and release policy and repealed Remain in Mexico. So it's like every single thing he could have done to make America less safe, to open up our border to criminal aliens, President Biden has done it. So we've launched 3 lawsuits to try to fight back, to point out that he's perverting the law to create these legal pathways through the rulemaking authority. It's actually making Missouri communities less safe. The most important lawsuit we've got pending right now is to force him to finish building Donald Trump's border wall. And Congress appropriated money for that, Annie. It's sitting there collecting interest right now. The appropriations bill specifically says that he has to erect new border barrier systems, period. But he has vexed, harassed, and delayed that process. We took him to court. I'm here to tell you, Annie, I think we're going to get a positive ruling out of the court in the coming days or weeks, and I want to come back on your show and talk about it. We will have been the first state in the nation to successfully sue the Biden administration over his disaster at our southern border. But don't forget, this isn't just about a difference in policy. People's lives are being negatively impacted in enormous ways across Missouri communities. 1,100 incidences reported of human trafficking, making Missouri the 4th worst state in the nation now for human trafficking. We've had more than 1,500 deaths in 1 year alone from fentanyl poisoning, 43 innocent children who died because of accidental exposure to fentanyl. So President Biden has turned every state into a border state by his disastrous open sign at the southern border, and we're going to fight back using the court process.
Well, we know that you have stuck to it, and you've joined other states as well in several of these different cases, and some you've had other states join you. I'm reading a press release from your office, and it says that since Biden took office, more than 8 million illegal aliens have crossed the southern border. That's more than the entire population of Missouri. Do you think that the president understands the gravity of the situation on the southern border? Does he get it?
Well, I think there's 2 things going on here. Either one, he doesn't understand. And look at the special counsel report that came out at the end of last week. I mean, the guy is asleep at the wheel. He has no idea where he is, what year it is, what he's doing, and yet somehow he's supposed to be the leader of the free world, which makes you wonder who's actually calling the shots there at the White House. But then secondly, he, even to the extent he's awake enough to understand what's going on, he doesn't care. They want the criminal aliens in this country. And then they want blue states to give them the right to vote so that no Republican can ever win another election. I mean, when President Trump says the system is rigged, this is exactly what he's talking about, and he's completely correct about that.
We're speaking with the Attorney General of the state of Missouri, Andrew Bailey. He joins us right now. You mentioned that Biden repealed Remain in Mexico. I assume that was through is that through an executive order that he did that?
Yeah, that's right. Through rescinding a rule. It was a policy position enumerated in a rule, and he rescinded it. And several states filed suit to try to prevent him from doing that. And the court essentially said, look, the president gets to make this decision. And if the people don't like it, they can sound off through their elected representatives in Congress. Mm-hmm. The problem is, rather than impeach Secretary Mayorkas for his failure to do his job and secure our southern border, rather than withhold funding from the Biden administration if they're not going to do their jobs, instead what we've got is this crooked deal being crafted in the Senate to provide more money and more statutes. Well, if he's not using the money that's already there and he's not using the law that's already on the books, why would we give him more? That doesn't make any sense. Instead, we need to hold him accountable for his refusal to use the tools in the toolbox today. President Trump had the same immigration code and reduced border crossings, illegal border crossings, by 90%. So don't let President Biden hold the rest of us hostage and demand some crooked deal out of the Senate.
I think it's an interesting point on the Remain in Mexico. I have a couple other questions I want to ask you, but when you said that, it kind of perked my interest because I've heard Democrat pundits say that that Biden can't unilaterally just say Remain in Mexico is in place because it would have to be a conversation that would be with the president of Mexico, which is a whole other conversation with the president of the United States. The guy who's the president of Mexico would have to be involved in that and be in agreement. But if it's in a policy that he inherited and was in place, and then executive ordered, signed it away, then that absolutely is on the president of the United States.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a simple formula. I feel like left-wing pundits want to overcomplicate it to confuse everyone. But at the end of the day, our immigration code is set up to where if you're not authorized to be here through law, you don't get to come here until you get the authorization. And if we catch you here, we should detain you and send you back. But President Biden is doing the opposite of those things. As you pointed out, he's cutting the razor wire at the southern border that the state of Texas put up in order to let new people in. He's created an app on phones and then advertised it in other countries and said, look, if you get on this app and find a sponsor in America, you can come on over. Again, this is a perversion of our law. And it's a tantamount to hanging an open sign at the southern border. And look, our entire legal system loses credibility if we're not going to enforce the laws that are on the books.
I want to ask you, we're speaking with the Attorney General of the state of Missouri, Andrew Bailey, about the importance of states' rights, federalism, the power that exists with the state of Missouri when we do also have a federal government. And, the Constitution comes into play, and it's very complicated, it's very intricate, it's very amazing. But explain to me the power and the position that individually the state of Missouri, and also in conjunction with the individual power of these other states like Alabama, Alaska, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, the list goes on, of states who have stepped up and said to the federal government, you're going to stop right there. We're going to exert our rights as individual states. How important is that in our system?
Well, certainly our constitutional structure is paramount to maximizing freedom, safety, and prosperity. And it's a shared power. The federal government is split into three branches, and each branch has certain powers that are enumerated in the Constitution. But remember, the Constitution exists to protect us from the government. And the 10th Amendment means something. And what it says is that any power not explicitly given to the federal government is reserved to the states and the people of states. And the states have a right to defend themselves, especially if the federal government is falling down on the job and refusing to secure our southern border. And we have the kind of death and destruction that we're seeing not only in Missouri, but across the nation. And so it's important that like-minded states band together. I think my office has partnered with other Republican attorneys general more than 160 times in the last several months alone. And that just shows how important it is to have strength in numbers. And certainly several of these lawsuits that we filed are in coordination with other state attorneys general, because, again, we want to speak with one voice that if the federal government is not going to do their job, then we have to step in and do it for them. And look, I served in the United States Army. I fought in the war on terror. I've seen what a secure border looks like because my platoon was tasked with securing a section of the border between Iraq and Syria in 2005. And we stood there with weapons and said, you're not going to come across. And that worked. And I'm here to tell you that Iraq-Syria border in 2005 was more secure than the disaster that Joe Biden has created at the southern border of the United States in 2024. And that's shameful.
Final question for the Attorney General, Andrew Bailey, who joins us now on the Annie Frey Show. I want to ask you to react to what's going on in New York City. Of course, we saw those illegal immigrants who attacked those police officers. New York City arrests them and promptly lets them go. They give the double bird to the entire city of New York City. I keep saying city of New York City. I got to stop saying that. But effectively, the entire system that is set up here in the United States of America. Then they flee. I think they got found somewhere in maybe Arizona. Are the laws that are in place in New York City is what the Alvin Braggs and the politicians in the state of New York and in the city of New York, are they getting what they asked for by putting into place laws that don't adhere to prioritizing American citizens?
Yeah, Annie, I think they absolutely are. I mean, look, we've seen this on a smaller scale here in Missouri with the disastrous social experiment when Soros-backed Kim Gardner is the circuit attorney in the city of St. Louis, and she essentially refused to enforce the law, had a 96% non-prosecution rate. That turns our safety and security over to the criminals. And obviously they don't have our best interests at heart. The same thing is going on in these blue states. And if we let Joe Biden let his disaster at the southern border continue, it's going to cause even more problems for the rest of us. That's why we've got to keep fighting back. Rather than the lawsuit, for to win here in the coming days.
Well, Attorney General, thank you for being with us, and thank you for updating on this. And like you said, this timeline seems like it could be near. We want an update when you get it. Thank you for being here today.
Hey, thank you so much, Annie. All the best to you and your listeners.
You as well.